What is up, everyone? Chris Manning here from the Locked On Cavs podcast. I want to thank you for making Locked On Cavs your first listen every day. Remember, we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Today's episode is a jam-packed one. Segment 1, Locked On NBA insider Antonio Daniels, you may be here in Valley Sports Southwest and other places, is going to come through, talk to me about Collin Sexton, the Cavs offseason, why he would have voted Darius Garland for most improved player last year, and more. Second segment, Evan and I on the eve of free agency are going to talk about the Collin Sexton market, whole bunch of stuff about there. In segment 3, we talked to Gavin Shaw, one of the hosts of Locked On Knicks, about Collin Sexton. This was recorded before all of the Jalen Brunson stuff really trickled out there, but a lot of the meat of that conversation I think still applies. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Arcade 1UP. Locked On Cavs is partnering with Arcade 1UP to give away 3 free NBA JAM Shaq machines. That's right, 3. These guys are known for making the incredible retro 3/4 scale at-home arcade games like Pac-Man, Golden Tee, and many more. Enter to win on arcade1up.com/lockedon. That's arcade1up.com/lockedon for your chance to win. Okay, up first, my conversation with Antonio Daniels. After that, Evan and I talking about Collin Sexton. And then third segment, Evan and I talking to Gavin Shaw from Locked On Knicks about Collin Sexton. Let's get into it. All right, thrilled now to be joined by Antonio Daniels, Locked On NBA insider, SiriusXM host. You can hear him on Pelicans broadcast, on Valley Southwest, or on League Pass. Antonio, you're one of my favorite people on League Pass, so it's a pleasure to get to talk to you and to talk to you about this team instead of obviously you talk about the Pelicans most often. But we're going to start with Collin Sexton because this is the big Cavs story right now. He is heading into restricted free agency. If you were the Cavs, what would be your approach to handling Collin Sexton where he's at right now? It's such a tough question, but what would you do?
It is. I think you have to, one, evaluate the season that you just had, the amount of growth that you just had, and think to yourself, how and where does Collin Sexton fit into that, if he does? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the thing. For me, everything is about fit. Everything is about fit. It's not about names. It's not about accolades. It's not about awards. It's about fit. You look at J.B. Bickerstaff and the job that him and that Cleveland Cavaliers coaching staff did last year in Cleveland without Collin Sexton, and you think to yourself, does Collin Sexton fit next to Darius Garland? Who was my most improved player of the year? Does Collin Sexton fit next to Lauri Markkanen and Mobley and Jared Allen and those guys? Does he fit? Because the thing is, if he doesn't fit, even though you drafted him, I get it. If he doesn't fit, maybe you got to look elsewhere.
Yeah, I think, Antonio, the trickiest thing with him is that he had that injury last year, obviously. He misses most of the year. And then they have all the success without him, even though there's things he does very well. So as someone who's played in the league and now covers the league from the perspective you do, how do you view that? Like, how do you just view a team having success, not because the guy's not there, but just without him, just based on the timing of his injury and how things just kind of unfolded?
But I think that's the same thing. I think you just said the same thing in 2 completely different ways, but you said the same thing. Like, if you have success when a guy's not there, you're having success when that guy's not there. Yeah. That's the reality of the situation. You know what I mean? And obviously the Cleveland Cavaliers, Cleveland became a what-if team last year. Because I honestly believe if they don't lose Jared Allen at the end of the season, they're a playoff team. Yeah. They are a playoff team. But the fact of the matter is they did lose Jared Allen. He ended up coming back late for the play-in. I mean, I get all that. I get that. But you have to work with what you have. That doesn't mean that Collin Sexton can't work in with what you have, but in every NBA organization, there are conversations that need to be had. Tough conversations sometimes. So now maybe J.B. Bickerstaff has a sit down with Collin Sexton. And listen, you saw what we did last year. It's not like Collin Sexton wasn't watching every single game, watching what worked, watching the growth of Darius Garland, watching having 3 7-footers across the front line looks like and how his skill set can complement those guys. Thing is, when a team has played well without you, if you're talking about a 5-game span, okay, it is what it is. But when you're talking about an entire season, now maybe it's time for Collin Sexton to sort of sacrifice who he's been for the better of the team.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I don't think you're wrong in saying, hey, you're saying the same thing in two different ways. And it's, I think the question Cleveland will have to ask you, obviously, because he's looking for $20 million. And with where they're at cap wise, that's a lot of money. It just is. It's how the business of the league works. You mentioned Darius Garland. You mentioned he would have been your most improved player pick. So, or was your most improved player pick. So what about Darius last year impressed you?
Everything. Everything. For me, when you start talking about most improved player,
yeah,
obviously you're looking for guys that took the quote unquote proverbial step from one season to the next season. That proverbial step for me has to include being an NBA All-Star. There was a reason that the Cleveland Cavaliers elevated to where they did this season. Obviously, before the injury to Jared Allen took place, you can credit a lot. You can credit JB Becker's staff, that coaching staff, but Darius Garland had the keys to that car. He had the keys to that car. They went where he took them. Everything went through him. Now, different guys ate on different nights. Sometimes it was him. You know what? Sometimes it was Jared Allen. Sometimes it was Lauri Markkanen. Sometimes it was Evan Mobley. Different guys ate on different nights. Kevin Love, Ricky Rubio, it didn't matter who it was, but everything went through Darius Garland. You know, when you get guys like Kevin Love, who a year prior to seemed disinterested in being in Cleveland, to play his role, a guy like Ricky Rubio to play his role prior to being injured in New Orleans, like that says a lot. That says a lot about the young talent in Cleveland. When you get older guys to sacrifice and acquiesce to the young talent that's there and want and welcome their role, that says a lot to what Cleveland has going. And for me, all that started with Darius Garland. You go back 2 years ago, Brandon Ingram, most improved player, NBA All-Star. Last year, Julius Randle, most improved player, NBA All-Star. This year, I know he didn't win it. Ja Morant got it. He was an NBA All-Star as well. But my vote went to Darius Garland.
Does the what you're talking about here, the culture, the older guys buying into a team that is really led by younger guys, does that also reflect positively on JB Bickerstaff and what he is doing in his role? Yeah,
for sure. We say all the time, for coaches to be successful, you have to speak their language. I played for Greg Popovich, and I think one of the things that he was great at, he didn't coach everybody the same. What I mean by that is this: if you have, obviously you're young, but I have 3 different children.
Yeah.
Right. What I say to one of my children may motivate them. And if I say that same thing to another child, it may break that child.
Yeah.
So now what that means is I have to know and understand what makes each child tick to make them the best version of themselves. Greg Popovich was great at that. He didn't coach Tim Duncan the same way he coached David Robinson, didn't coach David Robinson the same way he coached Mario Elie, didn't coach Mario, down the line. And I feel like JB Bickerstaff's style and way of coaching is he doesn't coach Darius Garland the same way that he coached Kevin Love. The NBA is not equal opportunity. Never has been, never will be. Kevin Love has earned the right to certain things. And I felt like coming into this season, JB Bickerstaff spoke a language that Kevin Love understood and respected. And that's why he's slipped right into that role and was fantastic at it.
Yeah, it's interesting on that note. It seems like twice now the Cavs have hired coaches that don't fit that mold that you're discussing. They didn't speak the guy's language. And then they go to someone else who obviously will come from the league, Ty Lue being the first, replacing David Blatt, and then JB Bickerstaff replacing.
It's important.
It's important, and it matters. I mean, you see that from Kevin Love. Like, Kevin Love buying in is like the testament to that, because him and JB have a relationship, but they also know that, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. He's not going to have us be doing a lot of weird practice stuff with pennies that you don't do in the NBA, that you do maybe do in college, but you don't do at this highest level. And that, I think you're right, that resonates and that buys in.
You know what, Chris? There's nothing more important, in my opinion, in today's NBA than having a coach that can relate to his players. I don't care about your offensive schemes. I don't care about your defensive schemes and your defensive philosophies and your offensive philosophies. If you have a coach that can relate to his players, they will run through a wall for him. So if I have all the right offensive and defensive schemes, but I can't relate to my players, they won't execute nearly as well than if I don't have the right offensive schemes, but I can relate to them. Give me a coach that can relate to my players, that can speak their language. You have different guys on that Cleveland Cavaliers bench that are capable of doing different things as far as putting in offensive schemes and so on and so forth. If your head coach speaks their language, I don't think there's anything more important in today's NBA.
Yeah. Well, and on this, the Cavs, obviously, we talked about this a little bit before, missed out on the playoffs, got to the play-in, had some injury stuff, but they didn't make it. And that is what it is. They have to call a spade a spade. So if they're looking to improve, if they're looking to level up and actually make the playoffs for real this year, improve with Darius Garland, improve with Evan Mobley in year 2, all of that stuff, what to you are the keys to this team taking that next step?
It sounds simplistic, Chris, but for me, it's a health question.
Yeah.
It's a health question because here's the question that I'll ask you.
Hit me.
Do you think the Cleveland Cavaliers are sitting in ninth if Ricky Rubio doesn't tear his ACL in New Orleans and Jared Allen doesn't, what do you do, fracture his thumb?
No, he fractured his thumb and he had like some other injury in that time as well. I think a concussion or something.
Right.
Evan Mobley missed time as well.
That's right. That's right. Do you think the Cleveland Cavaliers are sitting in ninth and playing in the play-in game if they're semi-healthy? I'm not even going to say fully healthy because fully healthy doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
But if they're semi-healthy.
I think so. I mean, I think there's a lot of reason to believe that a lot of what they were doing was sustainable. I think like their defense was proven out to be very, very good. I think Evan Mobley was incredibly impactful as a rookie in a way that was like really interesting. I think Darius Garland, as we talked about, was great. The Rubio one feels particularly meaningful because number one, they tried to go get Karis LeVert. They tried to get Rondo. Those things just didn't quite work in the way they think they were hoping. The Rubio was so big. And I think when I looked at him and I watched him play, he obviously is an incredible playmaker. He played big as a second guard with Garland. He's like 6'3", but he plays like he's a little bigger. Right. He walls up. Right. He was really smart. He was communicating. If you ever want a fun little like weird thing to look at, Jetty Osman's on numbers with Ricky Rubio versus with no Rubio. It's like one player is like a good NBA player and one player can't be in the league. It was like that stark of a difference. Rubio gave him this bump. They were not the same team. They've tried to bring in Karis LeVert. It didn't work in the way they hoped. And it's why I think they're linked.
Chris.
Yeah, hit me.
For me, Chris, I'm sorry. Everything is about fit.
Yes.
I don't care about name. Again, I don't care about accolades, all of that. Ricky Rubio fit. His skill set complemented what Darius Garland and this Cleveland Cavaliers team needed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's so many different things where free agency that happens and trades that happen, and everybody's always just looking at the numbers in the name. Always. The numbers in the name. Oh, well, we got this guy and he averaged this amount of points and this amount of rebounds, and no one pays attention to the fit. Again, you can have the numbers in the name, but if the fit doesn't match, it's not going to work. So if you look at all those players that you just named, the least accomplished one, probably, when it's all said and done, will be Ricky Rubio. But he fit the best.
Yeah.
But he fit the best.
Yeah. So let's end on this. You were there when he got hurt. He is now being very heavily linked to the Cavs to come back in some shape or form, considering it's his second ACL tear, but considering how good he was last year, does going back to that in your mind make sense as a backup point guard option?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because the thing is, there's no wondering. There's no wondering. Like chemistry's hard, and you just referenced it. You try and bring in Rajon Rondo, you try and bring in Karis LeVert, and it doesn't work because it's very difficult to simulate that chemistry that you have with Ricky Rubio. The thing is, if he's healthy and you go back and get him, you don't have to worry whether or not he fits or not. He understands the players. He understands the locker room. He understands the coaching staff. You know, he understands the vibe. So, yes, I think that definitely makes sense with it. And I think that's a great fit to go back and get him. Obviously, again, if he's healthy.
Yeah, that's the big what if. Antonio, thank you so much for your time. People again can find you on the various Locked On shows. Check you on Bally Sports Southwest, Sirius XM. Anything else you need to plug before you get out of here?
No, man, I'm good, brother. Thanks for having me, Chris.
All right. Before Evan and I talk about the Collin Sexton market on the eve of free agency, or the morning of, rather, as you're listening to this, Evan, he's going to tell everyone about our friends at Arcade 1UP.
You're absolutely correct. And boom, shaka laka. We got big news, and folks, I mean big news, literally big, because the one, the only NBA Jam is back. Arcade 1UP, the leader in home retro arcade games, is not only bringing back the best game ever, but they've made it bigger than and better than ever before with, wait for it, a legend, wait for it, Dairy Shaq Edition machine. People are obsessed with NBA Jam, and I'm thrilled to tell our listeners that you can once again play hoops with NBA legends in this arcade classic. Jump clear across the court and set the ball on fire in one of the first sports games ever to feature real and digitized NBA licensed teams. No fouls, no free throws, and no quarters required. You can compete with friends and family through their all-new Wi-Fi leaderboards, making you more than connected than ever, all while staying at home. Pre-order now from arcade1up.com. That's arcade1up.com for an estimated early September ship date. By the way, Arcade 1UP is the place for fun. They've got even more classics like Golden Tee, Mortal Kombat, and many others, just starting at $3.99 total. Check this out. They're also giving away an NBA JAM Shaq edition to a Locked On Cavs listener. Enter for a chance to win a game console for your man cave at arcade1up.com/lockedon. That's arcade, the number up, 1up.com/lockedon. You have till July 8th to enter to win the NBA Jam Shaq edition console. Don't miss out today. Enter today. Who you going to play with?
All right, Chris Manning, Evan Demerol here. Hope you guys like the chat with Antonio Daniels, who I thought was excellent. Let's talk about Collin Sexton. Evan, this is the big Cavs free agency story. This is the thing that I think will define their July, their summer in a lot of ways. Obviously, maybe a Darius Garland extension gets done in some shape or form. I would suspect it does. I also just think like the more complicated, juicy one is just the Sexton thing, because he's restricted free agent, because seemingly a lot of his market maybe evaporated on draft night when the Pistons got Jaden Ivey, and the Knicks are gonna get Jalen Brunson. There's just like a lot of stuff that is clouding what could be Collin's market. Dante DiVincenzo would make some sense now that we know he's going to be unrestricted, and you and I were talking before. You've noted that they've been interested in him before, but the focus here I think has to be Sexton. Can I read you, Evan, the teams that our friends at BetOnline have as the betting favorites if he's not going to be on the Cavs? Can I read you the list?
Of course. I mean, I don't really have any choice here. I think you're going to, no matter what.
I mean, you could have told me no, and I would have obliged. I'm not. This is a mutual, like, we're like a team here. This isn't just like Chris Manning like shenanigans on you. You're the shenanigan-over of the two of us, anyway. All right.
You're the straight man. I'm the funny guy. I'm the wise guy, if you will.
It means you get whacked if we're Goodfellas. But Collin Sexton, next team, if not the Cavaliers from BetOnline. Indiana Pacers are plus 200. The Pistons are plus 300. The Wizards are plus 350. They just also made a trade for Monty Morris and took Johnny Davis in the draft. New York Knicks plus 400. They're spending lots of money on Jalen Brunson. The Mavericks are plus 500. The Spurs are plus 700. The Trailblazers are plus 800. The Magic are plus 1,000. Those are the odds you can get. I wouldn't feel good about like betting on any of those. There's a reporting from Jake Fisher that the Cavs one of their earliest talks and offers for him was something more akin to the 3-year, $51 million offer that Jordan Clarkson signed on his extension. Sexton has been known to want $20 million in, I think, more than 3 years. It also just doesn't seem like this is something that is going to drag out. Like I just like don't really know where we're at with this. There's just like a lot of muddy. There's just a lot of like clouds in the water here as we're thinking about this.
I mean, there's probably a fire somewhere with all this smoke that's being screened around right now. But yeah, I think a lot of folks have surmised, especially after the draft, the Pistons, and also just being the Pistons being a financial dumping ground for the New York Knicks aspirations, kind of pulled themselves out of the race. They also pulled themselves out of the DeAndre Ayton race, which that was a Sexton destination kind of slash. The Pacers kind of had some interest before the draft, but like once, things shifted with Miles Bridges, despite what their front office said the other day. I think the Pacers are more interested in Bridges, just based on what I've gathered, than Sexton. And then teams like the Spurs make sense. The Wizards could still be like an odds-on, like a long shot favorite, I should say, even before the Monty Morris trade and getting Will the Thurl Barton and also drafting Johnny Davis as well. Like they could always pivot.
Yeah, and the Bradley Beal contract that is seemingly coming down the pipeline for lots of.
So, unfortunately, if you're Collin Sexton, you have to feel bad for him just like on a human level because he bet on himself last offseason when he turned down the Cavs' initial offer, which was reported to be about 100 million over 5 years based on what Jason Lloyd and others have said and what you and I have heard as well. And he wanted 25 million annually. That's what was kind of reported as well. And he bet on himself by turning that offer. Unfortunately got injured and now has kind of watched his suitors market dry up a little bit. I'm interested to see what's up.
Oh, the Hawks have won the DeJounte Murray sweepstakes, multiple first-round picks, and Gallo for DeJounte Murray is the deal.
As Jake Fisher and Mark Stein reported the other day, so good on them.
I mean, they've been great. Fisher, a king, but Woj just had this now. We'll see what the picks are, but another Cavs target theoretically off the board there, and
I say he wasn't necessarily a target just because of how high San Antonio's asking price was.
I think they made calls, and I think there was interest, and then the price of that said brick was like very high.
It was, and I think it'd be remiss of the Cavaliers organization not to call. But a lot of folks took Chris Feuder's report from back in like when he said in February the Cavs made calls at the deadline as well, and ran with it thinking this was recent. But back to Collin Sexton, I just think I see a path where he comes back to Cleveland, maybe on, like Fisher said, a 17 to possibly, if the Cavs want to play ball with him a little bit, bump it up to like 18.5 million a year deal. Maybe it's a 3-year contract, the last year being a team or player option or something along those lines. And then you just see what you have of Collin at that point. And if he's fully healthy, if he's able to ingratiate himself around this big three and all the other pieces they've accumulated through the draft and whatnot, you go with it. But he could also be a good trade chip as well because he does have a valuable skill set. And if the Cavs need to make more immediate upgrades somewhere else, they might be able to use Sexton's contract if there's like certain structuring in the way Kobe Altman just kind of lays it out for them.
Yeah, if Clutch is, which is Colin's camp, is willing to play ball in that sense, which is known to me, because that some of the stuff makes it more tradable.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah, hit me.
What would you think Sexton takes the qualifying offer, plays it out this year, and goes into unrestricted free agency next year?
No.
I don't think so either, but I've seen that possibility floated around by folks, and it's definitely it's worth thinking about, but I don't think it's worth putting much thought into.
I think things would have to get really, really bad in negotiations for that to be a thing. And at that point, you're probably trying to...
Especially after you had financial security, you turned it down once, it blew up in your face. I think you want to try and guarantee the bag as much as you can.
Yeah, and like guys just don't do that. Like that's just historically something guys coming off rookie contracts don't do. And like guys have had more leverage than Collin and haven't done it. So that's just what it is. Evan, I think what ultimately happens here, if I was to like look into a murky crystal ball, would be to say he's going to re-sign probably on like a 4-year contract. I think it'll be less than $20 million. I think it'll be pretty straight. I don't really know if some of the Kobe Altman things that he likes to do, the front loading, stuff like that, ultimately happens here. Maybe I'm wrong. It's just that seems like I don't know if they totally have all the leverage in the world here to do this. I don't think it quiets some of the online discussion and kind of chatter about what his role is going forward. I think from a basketball perspective, I think it is worth remembering that if Collin Sexton is healthy, this is a good basketball player. 20 a game, 20 points a game. I think a speed element the Cavs surely I think could need. There's an underrated cutting aspect to his game that I think could be really impactful. There's a lot I think still to like, even if the fit is a little unclear going forward with some of this. There's a lot to still figure out. But I think it is more likely not, considering the market, considering where the Cavs are at and what their kind of maneuverability is, that he is back on some kind of contract and we see how this goes going forward. What would you say your just best guess, but your best just prognostication is right now as we're recording this before free agency really opens?
Let's say 4 years, 18 million for Sexton, and that's just kind of
18 per, to be clear, not 18 overall.
Not 19 overall, it's 18 per. So
72 million.
72 million, which is obviously a hit for him financially, considering what the Cavs are willing to offer. It's $2 million less than last year, but at the same time, you could say Sexton is better than Caris LeVert right now, just in a bunch of different factors, but obviously give LeVert the benefit of the doubt. But I think it makes more sense to be paying the money you'd possibly be paying LeVert long term to Collin Sexton, and maybe use LeVert more as a trade asset if it doesn't work.
Yeah, look, I think if like I saw when I saw that Fisher reporting about the Jordan Clarkson contract thing, I was like, there's no way Collin should take that contract. He's just like a younger
Clarkson, Terry Rozier like extension is realistic for him.
Yeah, but the Rozier one is like more guaranteed years. There was like the Clarkson one is very much just like you're the specific thing. The Rozier one was a little higher in terms of its commitment to the player. Like the Clarkson one is very much this tightly 3-year thing, and maybe there's some benefit to, hey, 3 years, get back out on free agency at a good age. But like I look at that as like he's still in the contract comes at a time where he's more of an ascending player than Clarkson was when he got that deal. Clarkson was just more established at that point. Collin's still theoretically on that upward and should frankly still be on that upward trajectory. There's reason to like you get that money, you get that more loaded contract now based on your age. This is again, I think to me, Evan, this is the fascinating story of the Cavs summer. We'll see where it goes. We'll see if something happens Thursday night. I don't know, but we're headed to something here.
It's also noteworthy as well, friend of the pod, Matt Moore, did share in a little bit of a footnote in his latest article. A lot of it was about Jalen Brunson, but he did note that the Cavs have more or less deemed Isaac Okoro not available on the trade market this offseason. And that makes sense. He's a cost-controlled wing player. He plays defense. You want to maybe see what his offensive potential is and then maybe reapproach these conversations next offseason if you don't think he's worth extending. So,
Evan, before we go, because then we'll have Gavin Shaw on, 3 firsts and a future pick swap plus Gallo's contract for Murray. Is that price too high to you?
No, not really, considering you can maybe use John Collins as an asset if you don't.
Or just John Collins is good. Just keep John Collins.
Just keep John Collins. He's good, but the Hawks are like determined to trade John Collins for any like star caliber player with a pulse out there. But yeah, DeJounte makes a lot of sense next to Trae Young. It's the same thought process and ethos we have with pairing Darius Garland with DeJounte Murray is covers for a lot of the defensive miscues maybe Garland or Young have, and some people will call it buddy ball, but also allowing your point guard to take breaks and rest and having somebody who can reliably run bench units for you or just give opportunities to rest your key star is paramount in today's league, and I like it. I think it was an overpay. I maybe the 3 picks and the pick swap might have been an overpay, but I think 3 picks is a fair asking price, especially because, again, San Antonio doesn't have to play ball if they don't want to. They could have kept Murray and let this boil out as long as they possibly can. They're more than comfortable as an organization with doing that, especially with Kawhi. But, yeah, they got a trade done, I guess, and now the Spurs are in rebuild mode.
Yeah, that's a lot of picks. Where I was like, woo, sticker price, but I get it. I like him and Trae is very fun to me.
It's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be fun. Love this for my guy Brad Rowland who gets a podcast he can record earlier in the night instead of at like 2 a.m. like you normally has to. So congratulations to our friend Bradley. All right, after the break, it's Gavin Shaw, Locked On Knicks, talking about Collin Sexton. Again, some of this is recorded. This was recorded before the massive amount of Jalen Brunson news was dumped into our lives, but I think a lot of it is still pertinent, and I think it's a more unpacking of the Collin Sexton value going into free agency. But first, going to tell everyone about our friends at Sakara. Feeling your best starts with what you eat. Sakara helps you live a healthy, balanced lifestyle and truly enjoy it with delicious, plant-based, plant-rich, transformative nutrition that builds a foundation for living in your best body. Wow. Sakara is a wellness company anchored in food as medicine on a mission to nourish your body through the power of plants. Sakara gives you the tools you need to transform your life with organic, ready-to-eat meal delivery program and their functional wellness essentials. Their nutritionally designed chef-prep breakfasts, lunches, dinners, and more are made with powerful plant-rich ingredients, helping boost your energy, support your digestion, curb your sugar cravings, and get your skin glowing. Plus, it's delivered right to your door, ready to eat. Their essentials help you create a body you love living in. That includes their best-selling Metabolism Super Powder to their foundation, their daily supplement packs. Right now, Sakara is offering our listeners 20% off their first order when they go to sakara.com/lockedon20 or enter code LOCKEDON20 at checkout. That's Sakara, SAKARA.com/lockedon20 to get 20% off your first order. That's sakara.com/lockedon20. All right, here's Evan and I talking to Locked On Knicks' Gavin Shaw about Collin Sexton and analyzing more about the Collin Sexton market. Again, we're going to do a live show Thursday, 6 p.m., so tune in for that for about 10 or so minutes to chat for agency. and we'll break it all down on Friday's show. Until then, everyone, be well. Enjoy. All right, we're thrilled now to bring in Gavin Shaw, one of the hosts of Locked On Knicks. Gavin, you were the only host. I'm going to be transparent about this. I reached out to some people individually. I reached out to, our friends at Locked On Pacers, our friends at Locked On Thunder, some other folks. You were the one host in the network when I was like, hey, we need people to tell us who might be interested in Collin Sexton. You were like, yes, let's talk about this. So the Knicks have obviously been very linked to Jalen Brunson. There's Donovan Mitchell stuff out there. I mean, who knows what's going on with Kyrie Irving and if the Knicks will be involved there. That's just another guy. So when considering all the Brunson stuff, considering everything else going on with the Knicks, why were you still like, yeah, this could still maybe be a Collin Sexton destination and a team that could throw money at him this summer?
I think it's because the Knicks at this point have almost committed themselves to bringing in someone. I mean, the path they are pursuing became readily apparent on draft night, where they used a first-round pick to move off of what was left of Kemba Walker's contract. And granted, they got an extra one back, so it was really more just like 4 second-round picks. But the intent seems pretty obvious that they want to bring in a point guard this offseason. And despite the fact that he was very good down the stretch of the year, they don't necessarily see Immanuel Quickley as that guy that can start day one, game one. They don't see Derrick Rose coming off another major injuries, heading into from his early 30s, maybe a little closer to his mid 30s, as a guy who can be reliable game in, game out. And to be clear, Jalen Brunson is the obvious number one candidate there, right? They just hired his dad. Leon Rose, I believe, is quite literally his godfather and was his dad's agent.
I believe Leon Rose's son is now Jalen Brunson's agent. So there's just all these things. We're just like, wonder what their plan is.
So seemingly, overwhelmingly likely that they have some intel based on the path that they've taken, that Jalen Brunson wants to come to the Knicks or is very much leaning towards coming to the Knicks. And reports from guys like Mark Stein and Jake Fisher have confirmed that recently. But I think this conversation is still one worth having despite that, because if they do miss out on Jalen Brunson, and there does, at least as of a month ago, there seemed to still be a lot of confidence on the Dallas side that he wanted to come back, then I think they need someone in that spot. And Collin Sexton, I think, to your point, is one of those candidates.
So you touched on him a little bit before, and like you said, the Knicks are kind of primed to make a move. It could be a lot awkward if the Knicks do strike out on Jalen Brunson, but there is a good chance that he does stay with Dallas. I know, like you said, Mark Stein has reported that the Knicks are kind of clearing a path to sign Brunson, and that he's also reported at the same time, him as in Stein, that the Mavericks are going to kind of put up a fight for it. But you mentioned Immanuel Quickley before. Do you have any concerns, just as a guy who watches the Knicks on a night-to-night basis, a guy who covers them 24/7, 365, of any possible overlap between Sexton and Quickley? Because Quickley could be part of the future plans for the Knicks, but if you sign Sexton to serious money, you could stunt his development a little bit.
Yeah, so Chris was actually helpful in this, because he came on Locked On Knicks a couple of months back, and we had this conversation, and he pushed me a little bit more in the direction of Collin Sexton is content to some extent, and let me know if you guys feel like this has changed at all, but to play as kind of a combo guard, to not be the primary ball handler, and someone who has that sense of, I guess, being not only a willing passer, but can get to a point where he's an expeditious passer and playing smart basketball. And I think that's all you need to play off of someone like Immanuel Quickley. It sounds weird to phrase it that way, because obviously Sexton is a far more accomplished player at this point in his career. But I think where Quickley is really good is that he's developing primary guard skills, and that his ability to separate from his defender and break down a defense got dramatically better by the end of last year. And he was throwing passes that were just so far ahead of his rookie season in terms of making reads, I kind of like 1 or 2 help defenders away and manipulating defenses with his eyes. But I think him and Sexton would be fairly good together in the same way Quickley and Brunson, at least offensively, would be pretty good together, in that neither one is really a true point guard, but both of them have those elements, and I think it would be to their advantage that the other guy across the court could bend the defense, and they were attacking a scramble defense instead of going up against a static one, play in, play out. So I don't necessarily see it that way. I think it's totally plausible, but I think it would more so be because the Knicks just don't seem to have a lot of faith in Immanuel Quickley in general than anything specific about Collin Sexton.
That's fair.
So yeah. So this leads me to, I think, the crux of this. If let's just say that the Knicks, Brunson re-signs with Dallas day one, he becomes a target for them, right? Cleveland, I feel very confident in saying, is not going to let him walk for nothing. That is the thing about this that I think could complicate his market a little bit, just because he's a restricted free agent. a team could do. We haven't seen in several years that Chandler Parsons to Dallas kind of really team like player friendly RFA contract. Like those things have not quite worked that way in terms of trying to scare teams off that way. That obviously theoretically is an option, but we'll see. The other thing here is like if the Cavs wanted to do a sign and trade, I could see them pursuing that for the right price. I think that's not out of the question. I guess my question, Gavin, is what is the Knicks offer for a sign and trade that actually you think gets Cleveland calling? Because I think it would have, just based on the Knicks roster, they don't have a need for Julius Randle. I don't think you're getting RJ Barrett back, obviously. I think that's not happening.
Yeah.
So are you getting is a bunch of picks enough? Are you asking for a Toppin? Like what is the price here that maybe makes sense if they were going to go another route? Because again, I think at the end of the day, even if Cleveland doesn't plan on having Collin Sexton on this roster 3 years from now or something, or they still maybe want to move him in the future, they're not letting him walk in the summer for nothing. It doesn't make sense for where they're at, or frankly, it doesn't make sense from a team building perspective.
Yeah, I think from a Knicks perspective, what it would ideally be is getting off one of the veteran contracts that actually makes it feasible that they could afford Collin Sexton. And with Brunson, it's going to be interesting to see, assuming he does want to come to New York, whether they do that directly with Dallas in a sign and trade or there's a third party involved. And I think it would be kind of a similar situation with Cleveland, where, but obviously a little bit trickier because to your point, Cleveland does have that trump card of saying we can match anything you give him. While with Dallas, Brunson's obviously unrestricted and they sort of have to play ball if Brunson wants to come to New York. But that being said, I think something along the lines of like one of like Nerlens Noel, Evan Fournier, Alec Burks, and then you're throwing in to actually make that appealing to Cleveland. Maybe a Cam Reddish, you could maybe quote unquote appealing there. And one or two of those protected first round picks. To me, it's just all about if the Knicks miss out on Brunson, which is who's obviously plan A at this point. Maybe Kyrie Irving or DeJounte Murray might even be plan B and C. But if you get down to plan D, how desperate is this front office to remain competitive now? Because to me, that's the message that is getting screamed at me, is that this Knicks team is dying to be a 6, 7, or 8 seed rather than missing the playoffs by a comfortable distance again. And I think that's where, if you're Cleveland, I'd be pressing on that, saying, hey, we want a Quentin Grimes, we want an Emmanuel Quickley, we want an Obi Toppin back in this deal. Personally, if I'm the New York Knicks, I'm not really interested in that. I'm saying I want to give Emmanuel Quickley a shot at being point guard and seeing what he can do. But if this is a front office desperate to make a splash, there's a world where Cleveland, I don't know, maybe you do get a Quentin Grimes and a first for Collin Sexton. Again, not something I would do, but I kind of question where this front office is at in terms of we want to stay in power, we want to just keep our jobs.
Chris, let me float this question to you real quick, just to bounce it off Gavin a little bit. Would you accept Alec Burks, Cam Reddish, and possibly a future first if that's what the Knicks were offering? Because I think I'd be a little interested in that just because of the potential of Cam Reddish and how the Cavs kind of have a clear path to wing.
I'm good.
Are you sure?
I'm good. Cam Reddish is like the potential and idea of Cam Reddish is great. You have to pay him as well. You're not like you're saving yourself any money by trading for Cam Reddish. Like that's part of this. Burks is like fine, but like I don't like it's not like a massive, I think, help for you. Like you already have Karis LeVert. I don't think I need Karis LeVert and Alec Burks. What is the future first? Is it like a good first or is it one of the bad firsts that they have in their stash, right? Like
one of the bad
deal.
Firsts.
Yeah, so like what is that deal? I'm getting Cam Reddish, who has some interesting things. I think the idea of Cam Reddish is better than the reality. Just like honestly, just at that point I'm just like matching the offer and saying, okay, we'll have Collin Sexton. He provides the speed we need. With his scoring, I think to some degree he is underrated as a scorer just based on how efficient he's been at his age. Like, that doesn't do a thing for me, honestly.
That's fair.
Yeah, can I say something at you guys real quick?
Sure.
I mean, where are you guys at in terms of your urgency to bring Collin Sexton? Because this is something Chris and I touched on like last time. And to Chris's point, 24 points per game, good efficiency. What was it, age 21 season? That's nothing to scoff at. I know. Garland emerging is like potentially an all-NBA guy in the next couple of years, like complicates that a little bit and gives you maybe some pause. But do you guys want Collin Sexton back ultimately? I mean, even to your point, if you get like sort of a moderate return like that?
Yeah, I would. I think Kobe Altman kind of made it clear during Ochai Abaji's just press introduction that even though they drafted him and viewed him Abaji as a shooting guard, there's no like skill overlap between him and Sexton. And like you said, he's a very efficient scorer, 21 to 24 points per game. I think he still needs to find himself a little bit in the new offensive dichotomy the Cavs are just kind of running right now. But you don't really get many players like that, especially probably on a cheaper contract, just because he's coming off that meniscal tear and he's been out for the entire season. And the Cavs have a lot of ammunition to say that they were better without him on the floor last year, but they'd still like to have him. But I think there's just clear times throughout the season last year when the Cavs bogged down offensively, especially when their bench unit was out there and after they lost Ricky Rubio. Like, you look at Collin Sexton at the end of the bench cheering on his teammates and coaching them up, and you're like, he should be out there, and he'd probably be the spark this Cavs team needs offensively. And also, you probably would rather have him than Karis LeVert long term, just because, again, give LeVert the benefit of the doubt of training camp and getting an offseason to get healthy this year, but he was pretty bad for the Cavs last season. And if he continues to kind of stink it up, he's just a very moderate-sized expiring contract that you can maybe use as a trade chip at the deadline, and then you just kind of pencil Sexton in as your reserve 2 guard or possibly starting 2 guard depending on Abaji's development.
I would agree. I think if you're signing and trading Collin Sexton, it is not for something that it feels like a lateral move, and that feels like what the Knicks offer would be. I'm aiming, even if I have to include other assets to do it, like DeJounte Murray. I don't think the Spurs really have interest at this point, but like that is the caliber of guy I think you're swinging for. I think you're swinging for something that is like not just an upgrade, maybe in terms of talent, but like fits really well. And it's like I look at like a Burks, Reddish, kind of like a 21st round pick in like 2 years. Like that doesn't like get me. That doesn't do anything for me. And if I'm looking at Collin Sexton and you're betting on him, like one of the biggest holes of last season for Cleveland is that he got hurt before we kind of really got to see how that looked and have more data and film to kind of understand that. And I think Cleveland has to kind of make the same educated guess there. You could talk yourself into his speed, his shooting, if you can pump up that volume, stat kind of taking some of the workload off of Garland. You know, there's stuff you can talk yourself into that I would just rather run it with him, match it, like just sign him to a contract versus like just blah amount of stuff. Like like Alec Burks is like had a really nice post Cleveland run. Cam Reddish like might be fine, but it's just like he was kind of in Atlanta, and then he didn't play for the Knicks when he got there. That's weird. And like that package just in particular in my head is just like I'm kind of good. And I think reasonably the Knicks would be like, we don't want to do more than that. We Toppin is on his way up. He's looked really good of late. Like RJ Barrett is obviously not going to be included in this trade. Like Quentin Grimes, like none of that does it for me. Just give me the guy I know is good versus stuff that might be good.
Yeah, I think that's totally reasonable. So, do you guys think this ultimately ends with Sexton back in Cleveland? All this being said, because I think we can just circle back to, I mean, Chris, what you were saying right at the very beginning of this episode, right? You go around the league and like there just isn't an obvious team where it's like, oh, like kind of what the Knicks were thinking about Mitchell Robinson with the Detroit Pistons before they drafted Jalen Duren. This team's going to grossly
Pistons might have been the one. Pistons might have been the one. They took Jaden Ivey, and like you don't need Jaden Ivey and Collin Sexton. You just don't.
The Pistons would have been the one. I think the Wizards had some varying interest in him, but they took Johnny Davis. I think you look at the Pacers.
They have
Brad Beal, but
they also have no money. Like this is the thing. They have no money.
Yeah.
But and then like the Pacers were an option too. I think the Knicks were always a team you could circle back to a little bit, and the Spurs are a team that has been reported to be interested in him. But at the end of the day, I think because of the draft, a lot of his market dried up, and there could be a team that just makes an offer out there that the Cavs can't match. And I don't think Cleveland's going to hold Collin hostage if they want him to let him test the waters free agency. I think they will. But I think ultimately he's going to end up circling back to the Cavs, and it'll just come down to the negotiations between the organization and Rich Paul at that point.
Yeah, and I would guess it's not going to drag out a long time. It doesn't seem to benefit anyone if this is going to drag out a long time, because if like his market dries up, you just come back and do business. And maybe there's a surprise here, maybe there's something we're not seeing, but it feels more likely than not that he is back on some kind of contract, and we see how this looks in the fall, and maybe he'll put on a show in New York when he's he'll get his MSG performance, and Knick fans will get mad, or we'll be like, yes, maybe they should have got him instead of like not. Well, into this, Kevin, are they getting Jalen Brunson? If you were to bet today, if you were to bet on BetOnline today, would you bet they're getting Jalen Brunson?
Well, that's the only place I'd bet, Chris. And yeah, I think I would bet that they're getting Jalen Brunson. Look, I mean, this front office, they've basically stake their jobs on the idea that they're getting Jalen Brunson. That sounds melodramatic a little bit.
That's an insane sentence to say. It's like, yes, my job depends on like Jalen Brunson. That's a wild. Like Jalen Brunson's great. He had a great playoff. That's an incredible sentence.
They've just not even how he plays, just the fact that he comes to New York, because they've just so thoroughly telegraphed this whole season that that's their big move. And the scary thing is like obvious to your point, Jalen Brunson is not a life-changing move if you're a Knicks fan, but he does represent a definitive upgrade at that spot. I mean, someone who brings a stabilizing force. I think someone who could be really good for RJ Barrett, and I would be surprised at this point, given all the little breadcrumbs we've gotten, if he doesn't end up in New York. And they've again, where this Collin Sexton thing gets interesting is I think you're going to see a desperate front office if they do not get Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, that's where this could really open up, I guess, for the Knicks and the Cavs, and we'll see where that kind of goes. All right, check out Locked On Knicks, Locked On Cavs. We're going to be back on Thursday, live show, 6 p.m. We're going to go 10-15 minutes live, just react for agency, have a full episode on Friday. Until then, everyone, be well.